In this video, I'm going to talk about the topics that I have listed as possible things for us to read in the second part of this semester. This list can expand if you have suggestions, so please give me suggestions as soon as possible because I want to vote on the list pretty soon. And also, the sooner I have suggestions, the sooner I can find readings. Um, and this video is optional. If you don't care, you can like just ignore it. For all of these topics, if you want to know what the particular readings would be, you can email me. In the past, I've uploaded them to Canvas, but this is too many PDFs. It's too much work. So, and some of these I actually haven't 100% figured it out yet. So, um, email me if you can. So, topics: annihilation of caste. So that's pretty straightforward. We'd read the I said I'm not going to talk about the specific readings, but actually some of them I will, just because that's the easiest way of explaining what the topic is. We'd read the famous sort of back and forth speech slash written um, stuff by Ambedkar and Gandhi, and then there's also a philosophy article relatively recent on the topic, the philosophical underpinnings of the annihilation of caste or something like that. So we'd read that, and then I mean the topic is relatively straightforward. So I would say don't be put off for voting for this if you've read the Ambedkar Gandhi debate before. Like it's always worth rereading classic political philosophical texts, and classic philosophical texts of any kind. You can read them over and over again, and it's always useful. Um, so yeah, capitalism. Again, relatively straightforward. This is about a little bit what is capitalism, mostly to what extent is capitalism justifiable? Why should societies be capitalist if they ought to, or why should societies not be capitalist if they ought not to be? Anarchism is about political authority, basically. So anarchism is the view that there is no justifiable political authority. What is political authority? Well, the government tells you stuff to do. It makes all sorts of rules. It tells you you have to pay taxes. It says there are all sorts of laws you have to follow. You have to, sign up to get an ID card and stuff like this. So anarchism says none of that is okay. And so this is the debate over whether anarchism is correct or not. Colonialism is about why is colonialism wrong? So what makes colonialism wrong? Communism is basically like capitalism, except substitute communism, except with a bit more emphasis on what is communism, because we do not live under communism, we live under capitalism. So we need a bit more sort of explanation of what's going on with communism. Cosmopolitanism is the sort of view that it's opposed to views that say we have special duties to our compatriots. What does that mean? Well, you are a citizen of a certain country, say you're a citizen of India, and the Indian government more or less looks after Indians, or at least ideally, it looks after Indians. The Indian government is not very concerned with what is happening in Borneo or Mexico or Guatemala or something like this. And similarly, the government in Guatemala doesn't particularly care what's going on in India and so on. When Indians pay taxes to the Indian government, the expectation is that these will be spent to help Indians. When people in America pay taxes to the United States government, the expectation is that these will help Americans and so on. And that's the basic view. I mean, it's not as if you can do whatever you want to people outside your borders. So the thought is you can't just like drop bombs on people just for fun as long as they're not part of your country. But the general thought is that, look, you have a special bond with your compatriots. You're all in it together, and your government exists to protect you, not other people. And then cosmopolitanism just sort of denies this, basically. It says, no, country borders are not the sorts of things that are morally important. And so this is the debate over whether cosmopolitanism is correct or not. Deliberative democracy is a theory about democracy that says what makes democracy good and what makes democracy justified and what makes democracy the sort of uh, thing that everybody has a right to live under is that it's a process of governance where we sort of get together and work out how to live together. So we talk with each other and we sort of hear what other people think about topics and we share our thoughts on topics. And through this process of deliberation, we kind of enact a form of governance which is uniquely valuable and good and sorts of things like that. So this is the debate over whether that's true, and if it's true, what does that mean? Is democracy justifiable because of this sort of special deliberative uh, feature? Egalitarianism is the view that everybody sort of, because everybody is equal, so to speak, everybody ought to be made equal in the sense that like the government should treat everybody equally. So what does equal mean? Well, there's different kinds of egalitarianism, but yeah, maybe that's as much as I'll say. So this is the debate over number one, is egalitarianism true? So should the government sort of make everybody equal? And number two, if it is true, what flavor? How should it make people equal? Should everybody have equal resources or equal happiness or something like that? So that's egalitarianism. Global justice is a sort of broader topic than cosmopolitanism, but it's about the same kind of question, which is like, what do people owe to people far away from them? So we are in India. What do people in India owe to people in Mexico? What do people in Mexico owe to people in India? So we're going to talk a lot about justice in this class, but the first stuff we're reading, Rawls, is about sort of domestic justice. What do people in India owe to people in India? What do people in Mexico owe to people in Mexico? And then global justice just makes it a global question. Immigration is about the right to immigration. So do people have a right to go wherever they want, or do countries have a right to close their borders in certain ways when they want to? More on democracy. Uh, can't remember what I had in mind for this, but there's just democracy is a really big topic in political philosophy. So maybe I didn't have anything specific in mind. There's just lots of stuff that can go here. But we're going to read a bit about democracy, mostly about instrumentalism and non-instrumentalism. And so if you want more democracy stuff and deliberative democracy is either not enough or doesn't sound interesting, you can vote for more democracy. Multiculturalism is the idea that government should allow people of various cultures to some degree, like live according to how those cultures want to live. And so, for instance, you could have different laws for different religions in a country, or you could allow people of a certain religion to govern themselves using religious law. Um, so that's the idea of multiculturalism. And then the main debate we look at here is sort of, is that a good idea or not? And one of the big objections to multiculturalism is that this can be sexist. So if a lot of cultures have sort of rules or traditions that are not as good for women as they are for men, it looks like having a multicultural society in the sense of allowing these cultures to make decisions themselves might lead to worse outcomes for women who belong to those cultures. And so that sounds bad, but it also sounds bad not to allow cultures to sort of do their own thing. So what do you do about that? National minorities is a similar sort of question, which is when you have a state and you have groups within the state that are minorities in some respects, so like religious minorities or racial minorities or something, uh, what are the challenges associated with this, and how should governments be set up in order to accommodate national minorities to the extent that they ought to be accommodated, and what is the extent to which national minorities ought to be accommodated? So really, it's kind of the same question as multiculturalism, but multiculturalism, we'd be reading the sexism stuff. National minorities, we'd just be reading other stuff on the topic. So you could vote for both if you want to read about the topic. Non-human animals is just the political philosophical questions, well, some of the political philosophical questions concerning human and non-human animal relations. So how should, political society be set up so as to accommodate animals, if in fact it should be set up like this? Patriotism and nationalism, that should maybe be two topics. So it may be split into two topics when we're voting. Patriotism is the idea that you should care. Well, patriotism in political philosophy is the idea that you should care in some special way about your country. And so we've seen this earlier when I talked about cosmopolitanism. Cosmopolitanism is kind of rejecting this. So this topic is kind of the flip side of cosmopolitanism. We'd be looking at kind of arguments from the opposite direction about like whether patriotism is good, and similarly nationalism is the idea that the state exists for the sake of like the people within it, the nation that's within it, and so the state should protect and promote uh, the group of people that exists that makes up the state. And so we debate about whether this is right or not, and if it's right, what should be done about it. Political obligation is related to anarchism. It's basically the question, look, the government makes all these laws, and do you have any reason to follow those laws? And if you do, what is that reason? Like, should you really, like, who put the government in charge? Why do they get to make laws? And why do we have to follow those laws? Or do we even have to follow these laws? So anarchism is one specific view about political obligation, which is to say, there's no such thing. Like no government should exist, and nobody's obligated to follow them. But there are many views other than anarchism. So political obligation, we'd be looking at this topic not from the point of view of anarchism necessarily, but just from all the various, not all of them, but some of the various arguments for and against political obligation and why it exists and what we should do about it. Secession is when a group of people sort of leaves a state taking some territory with them. So, if Kashmir were to not become part of India anymore, that would be secession. Or, lots of parts of lots of states want to break off. There are lots of secessionist movements in India beyond just Kashmir. And then there are lots of secessionist movements all over. There's Virginia and Texas and California and the West Coast and Maine, at least just in America. And then, of course, many other countries have secessionist movements too. So we'd be looking at, is there a right to secede? And if so, when? And then finally, voting ethics. You get to vote, or maybe you're not old enough. I don't know how that works in India, but maybe eventually you'll get to vote. And how should you vote? Should you vote for what's best for you, or what's best for everybody? Maybe you shouldn't vote at all. Do you have a duty to vote, but it doesn't particularly matter how you vote? So that's the voting ethics question. That's all the topics. Like I said, please suggest more if you want more.